Okay, so welcome back to another episode of Finding Your Way with Lori and Tonya. We are super excited that you have found us today. Listen, if you're a first-time listener, we believe wholeheartedly that you have found us for a reason, and there is something in today's episode for you, I guarantee it. And if you are a returning listener, we love you, we appreciate you, and we are so grateful to have you back. We only ask that if this resonates with you, forward it and share this with someone that you love, that you feel like could get the same information, and this may help. So we actually have another guest today that I am super secretly excited about. And I'm going to give it to Lori to discuss.
Yes, and I'm excited too, because I don't know Karen as well as Tonya does, but we're going to get to know each other today. So Karen Carrington is an award-winning talk show host, author, mental health advocate, certified personal development trainer, cosmetologist, as we can see by your beautiful self, and the proud recipient of the Top 100 Black Women to Watch in Canada Award and the Best Canadian Social Media Influencer Award. Her talk show, The Karen Carrington Show, is a safe, judgment-free zone, inspiring viewers to be the best versions of themselves. Her best-selling book, A Fresh Start, allows readers to reflect on their life purpose while encouraging healing and growth despite their fears. Karen Carrington's life mission is to leave the planet a better place than she found it, making sure everyone felt loved.
Listen, and she's doing it every day. So I do have, and when we have a guest on, Karen, I have to explain a little bit about how we know them, especially if we know them like we know you. So I met Karen in Sedona at a Jack Canfield Break the Floor to Success 7-day intensive workshop. And I think it was like the last day or the next to last day. And these workshops, if you've never been, first of all, highly recommend, but it is intensive. And so you are there at 8 a.m. and it is 5 or 6 at night before he lets you go. And you are exhausted by the time you get back to your room. And then there's homework. And so I remember Lori and I were sharing a room because Lori and I are there together. And I remember, and I remember thinking, okay, I've got to get out for a minute and go for a walk. So I grabbed my water and I walked and we walked downstairs. It was a big, just beautiful property. And I walked downstairs and first of all, it's hot as hell. So it's 117 degrees in Arizona. And there is this L-shaped couch. Maybe it's actually a U couch sitting outside. And there's this beautiful woman on it and she's sitting on one end and she's talking on her phone. And I just walk up and I sit down. And she gets off the phone and I say hello and she says hello. And I swear to you, 2 hours later, we are laying head to head on these couches and we have told our entire life story to each other. And literally we're probably at this point singing Kumbaya and holding hands. Like we have just all of a sudden become best friends. And I come back to the room. I'm like, Lori, I just met somebody. And she's like, a man? I'm like, no. And it was beautiful. And it was divine intervention. And it was a beautiful friendship from day one. So we are so excited to share you with everybody.
Thank you so much for having me and for bringing me back down memory lane. Jack's Breakthrough to Success is actually coming up next weekend. So it's like our anniversary, Tonya, of where we met. And bringing me back down that memory, thank you for doing that, because I do feel like we're all best friends. I do feel such great comfort with you. I love the sense of our friendship, our bonding, and I look forward to today's conversation to continue that exact feeling.
Yay. So we're excited to have you.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, let's do this.
I did not spend 2 hours on an outdoor couch with you. I may not know all the life stories that you've told. So for me and for our listeners, will you just tell us a little bit about your story? Our podcast is really all about sharing where we were and how we've improved and grown over time and where we are now, where we're shooting and striving for. So we'd love to hear about that story from you.
Yeah. I'm going to start back with when I was working corporate and I was married, have 2 boys. And, it sounds like that perfect life, a job with benefits and a marriage with security, you know, that sense of stability and unconditional love. And for me, I was dealing with a lot of anxiety and I didn't realize that I had it, but I was constantly, even though I was happy, I was constantly worried about things. I was worried to the point that it was affecting the way I was in relationships and in relationships with myself. And it really started to consume my life. And I don't even know what I was worried about. I was just always what ifing, what if, just having these stories in my head that I would fabricate. What if we lose the house? What if, I'm not good enough as a wife? What if I look too fat? It was always just this voice in my head that I'm not good enough. And I do believe that started from childhood where, as a child, I was never told by my upbringing that I was loved or I was enough. And not making excuses for my parents. I know, they were doing the best they could with what they knew. But I certainly brought that into my adult life of looking for validation elsewhere. I would look for that in my job, in my relationships, in my marriage, and it just turned into finally seeking help. I knew something wasn't adding up, always in this anxious state, thinking fast, moving fast, getting a lot of things done, but nothing was getting done. There was always this sense of urgency. And I don't know where that was coming from.
Well, you just said it, identifying it. And being able to, because how long did you live in that space before you were identified it and realized? And I think, Lori and I have different but similar places where the anxiety and the not enough and the depression sets in, and you live in it and you sit in it for so long until something makes you identify it and start taking action.
And I was in that for about, I'm trying to think, I was diagnosed in 2007 with general anxiety disorder. And I had it since I was a teenager, and I didn't get it diagnosed in 2007. And it's when I realized that I just couldn't emotionally or mentally or physically function. I didn't know what was wrong, but I knew something wasn't right. And you're right. Sometimes we just sit in there, but it's when you hit rock bottom and you can't go down any further to the point where I'm crying incessantly and having thoughts of not wanting to live anymore. That's when I knew something was wrong. I never, stayed in those thoughts, but even if it crosses your mind for just a second, something isn't right.
Yep. Well, and to hear that, and then to see how far you've come, I think, and to see just the blessing and the positivity, just the ray of sunshine that you are now, because that is so different. Those are two different people. We'd love to hear how you got there. So you get this diagnosis, and then what?
And then what? Good question. Then what? Then my marriage broke. It's when I realized that, and I take ownership for the things, but when my marriage, and I got divorced and I was really on my own to figure things out, is when I realized things have to change. When I'm on my own, you see what I'm saying? And so I really started to get into the Word of God, and I would start doing personal development training, just like we were talking about with Jack Canfield. And I would start getting myself out there with other women's groups and, meetups. That's when things started to change. So yes, to answer the question, it's when I got divorced in 2012 is when you would think that's where everything went downhill. But for me, that's when it wasn't a breakdown. My divorce was a breakthrough. Yeah. And when I'm forced to do something on my own, and for many women, that's when I found myself, when I was on my own. And yes, I was stumbling on rocks and I was scaling walls and trying to navigate new spaces. And as scary as that is, it's also refreshing to make mistakes on your own terms.
Well, and I think similar for me is when I think that divorce was a catalyst to,
Mm-hmm.
I was doing the work about 1.5 to 2 years before. And I think that I was doing the work, but they were still on plateau. Like I still was at this place where I could only get so far, and I was just stuck. And I was continuing to do some daily work, but I just could not get over the hump. And I realized that honestly, it was the marriage and everything that was attached to that marriage that was holding me back. It required so much of me, so much of my time, energy, effort, but it was giving nothing in return. And so I think that's when I could say was kind of the catalyst for me as well.
Yeah, that's what we have in common. I remember on that comfy couch. That's
Yes.
We talk about that a lot. Yeah.
You talked about ingesting things, God's word, personal development, but what actual actions did you take? Because we know that knowledge is power. However, you have to put knowledge in action for things to actually change.
Yeah, that's so true, because sometimes you can get addicted to learning, Lori, but then you don't implement.
Yeah.
Right. And you're just ingesting and not taking action. So for me, the taking action was realizing, having the discernment to know what's for me and what I need to release that no longer serves me. And I think for me, one of the biggest action was stepping out in my purpose and realizing, yes, I work corporate, but realizing I have a lot to offer the world. And that's where the Karen Carrington Show was birthed. My life is a show.
Yes, it is.
It is a show, and so when I just took that action and got the studio and started to realize that my story needed to be heard along with other people's stories, it's from the show that launched back in 2017. That's where that action I took really catapulted where I am today. That's really put me on the big screen and put me in the forefront, and realizing that when I started to share my story, I realized I wasn't alone. I used to hide my story in shame. But when I wrote my book, A Fresh Start, and when I started my show and realized the more I was vulnerable and the more I was authentic and the more I was relatable, that's where the healing was starting, not only for the people listening, but for myself.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't living in shame anymore. I'm going to tell my story. My name is Karen Carrington. I was hurt. I've been traumatized. I've been betrayed, but I understand I have to do the work. And here I am. I'm showing up. Here's my story. Who's going to ride along with me? And I've been doing that since 2017. And here we are.
And I'll tell you, I watch your show. And I know you took a little hiatus for COVID, but you've said it's coming back, and there has been several times and it's a live show too.
Right.
It was fun. And I remember like you talking and having a guest on and the things you guys were talking about. And I thought, oh my God, like me too. It was so relatable. And I remember typing in the chat, like asking one of the guests a question. And I thought, and of course you were like, oh my God, it's Tonya from South Carolina. And I thought, oh God, but I will say that, what you do, you're putting it out. Even during that one episode, I remember like vividly, it was so honest, and it was so I felt like everybody could probably go me too. And so I think what you're doing and what you're putting out is really something, and content and information that everybody, you do a lot of relationship conversations. And
I
so
do.
I would love for you to talk a little bit about that too. I mean, because I think that we can have all these tools in our toolbox, right? And all the things we do to work on us, but in the grand scheme of things, we are also in relationships with people outside of us. And so you are really great about helping people understand how to connect and to be in relationships with other people once they're in a good one with themselves. And so I'd love to hear a little bit about just how you talk about being in relationships with other people and any advice you have to give on that.
Yeah, that's a great question. When I talk about relationships, I usually talk about the things that we don't feel comfortable talking about in relationships. And that is the pain after, when they're over. Like, where are you in your relationship with yourself? And thank you for bringing, shedding light on those episodes where we were talking about other people. And you're right, a lot of the episodes are relatable. Like you said, you could relate. I could relate to them too. Like, I've been in these situations too. There's some things that I've never really shared before because my show is about the platform for other people. But I too have gone through hurt. There are some things that I've never shared because I'm thinking, oh my God, what are people going to think? They're going to think that I can't hold down a relationship. But that's what I love about your podcast, is you could say anything here. And I'm more than happy to share some of the things that I went through, and that I did feel a bit, there was shame around that, where I was in a relationship where I thought, Lori, I thought he was the one. I was certain he was the one. And I was willing to put everything aside that I have built. I have so much success around me, and I was willing to put that aside to start this relationship, because I told myself I deserve love. I deserve happiness. I work so hard as an independent woman. It's my time to just relax and just be. And I'm telling you, I believed every word this man said. And even if there was a red flag, as red as the blouse I'm wearing today and as red as the lipstick I have on, my heart didn't want to see it. Mm-hmm. And I remember feeling, when we were planning to go forward in a committed relationship, I was even, dreaming of spending the rest of my life with him. This has never happened to me before, but I just never heard from that person again. And every fiber in my being thought, oh, he got in an accident somewhere. I'm sure he'll text, or his phone's dying. I'm sure it's going to get back on soon. Or I'm sure he forgot to message. I said that to myself for weeks. And finally, I had to come to the realization, Karen, he's gone. It's gone. It's over. And then I got to the realization, I don't think anything ever started. What's over? This imaginary thing that you had in your head that you wanted to believe? And so I played with this tug of war of forgiving myself and giving myself grace. And I should have seen the signs. And why didn't I see it? And I was so hard on myself. And then I had to come to the realization that when people ghost, it's not about you. It really is about them. And I really just had to forgive and let go. And not only that person, but forgive myself. It's okay to fall in love and want to be in love. I stopped beating myself up. We do that a lot.
Yes. Well, and first of all, thank you for sharing that, because I know how vulnerable that is for you. And I also know the conversation that you and I had not too far back about this exact topic. And I gotta say that the way you handled it was with grace, but also with vulnerability. And we had talked about, you had never really been that vulnerable in any other relationship. And so, I think the question that we talked about that night on the phone was, what lesson is this for me? And what do I need to learn? Because you finally released yourself to rely on somebody else, and it just completely went away. And I think as we talked that night, I could hear the hurt, but I could hear the love. Like, there's just this thing in you, and I know we call it survivors. We're survivors, right? But there is this thing in you that is and the more I get to know you, the more I see it. It's more than a survivor, right? It is so bright and is so light and airy, and people, when they come in contact with you, but we do that for other people. And sometimes we forget to do it to ourselves. And it's that giving yourself love and giving yourself grace and forgiving yourself. And I think we talked about that night, is just, wow, how vulnerable you were. And you can't not do that again. Like, you can't, just because of the hurt, you can't put it back up.
Yeah. And I remember the funniest thing ever. Lori, what I said to Tonya that night is, first of all, Tanya's one of my safe places where I go. She's my safe place. And Lori, I told her the story and I said, I gave this guy 2 weeks. She went, 2 weeks? I would have given 2 days, girl. Like, and when she said the 2 days, I felt like, oh my gosh, like, did I give too long? I love the way like Tonya was just, no, that's way too long. That's way too. But what Tonya didn't do was she didn't judge me. If I needed the 2 weeks, she gave me that 2 weeks. She would have done 2 days. And what I love about that conversation is that I highly suggest that when you're in those places is to call a friend. I knew that I can call a friend that I could trust. And I knew that when I called someone, and this is for anyone listening, advice, to call someone that you feel safe with, that won't judge and won't only cheerlead you on. Like, oh yeah, leave him, blah, blah. Tell you the truth. Like, she would have told me maybe, hey, maybe you're misunderstanding, maybe, like, she would have given me that truth that I needed to hear. And so for all those who are listening, that best moment in that was reaching out and having the courage to tell someone, and someone that I felt safe with. I really highly recommend that we're in these stories because we want to hold them in shame. And we think we're the only one going through it. And that's what I love about these kind of conversations that we're having, is that there's someone out there going through that as well. I really thought, girl, I thought I was the only one on the planet that got ghosted. I thought it was just
It's not.
And I love that y'all's conversation came back to what was the lesson, because I think all of us that have grown over time and gone through these journeys of self-improvement and growth, we can look back and go, our old self wouldn't even tried to look for the lesson. We would have hung out there in that misery and that struggle for as long as it took, because we weren't aware enough to know that, wait a minute, there's a blessing in every situation. And so what is the blessing here? What is my lesson here? And y'all rattled off 3 or 4 that you got from that experience. And was it painful? Absolutely. You can hear it in your voice when you're talking about it. But how resilient are you that you can now talk about it and share your strength with others that are going through it? Because just like you, other people feel like nobody else has experienced this. I'm a little unique starfish over here that like, special, that nobody else has ever experienced this. But I think that's the power of storytelling, is that you may not be the only person, and maybe somebody's hearing your story today that they go, oh wait, Karen went through that, and I hear the strength in her voice, and I hear that, yes, she opened herself up and she was vulnerable, but she's still loving. Like, she's still out there putting herself out there and being vulnerable, even though it hurt her in the past. And so kudos to you for being aware enough to do that, because not everybody could.
Thanks for saying that, because sometimes I was even thinking like, well, if you were ghosted, maybe there's a reason why. Maybe there's something wrong with you, why he left. That's the voices I was saying. If you tell people, then something's wrong with you, or how come you couldn't see the signs, and you must be really out of touch and really blind and really naive. And so that was that old self again. It did come back of not being good enough. You're not smart enough. There was times where, the old me, I would have gotten a plane and try to find him and try to convince and so I do admit it was hard because there's no closure. When you're ghosted, there's no closure. It is like grieving someone who's still alive. That is so painful when you don't have the answers. And sometimes we think closure is talking it out. You hash it out. Okay, you did this, I did this. Okay, I'm sorry. you could have closure without getting the apology from the person.
Yes.
That was a lesson for me, is how do I get closure without ever hearing back from this person? And for me, it was going by the water and writing a letter and releasing and forgiving and putting all my feelings in that letter and releasing it into the water. And that was my closure for me. Closure doesn't have to come from both sides.
I
love
love
that.
that. I mean, listen,
Yeah.
I mean, what a great way, and a way that is so not easy, because writing that letter is not easy, but anybody can do it, right? I mean, and I've heard of someone has said to me before that they wrote a letter and they burned it. So whether your element is water or fire, right. So sitting and getting it out. And a lot of times with writing, it really and truly, it's like you're getting it out of your body, your mind, you're putting it on paper and being able to, that's amazing. And if that's one thing our listeners take away, is how profound it is to write it down and to send it away. However you send it away, putting it in that water and letting it float away, and taking it literally, symbolically, energetically away from you and sending it out with love and light, right?
Yep.
And then being able to say to yourself, it was your lesson, and you forgive yourself and you forgive him. And what a great way to get your closure when there's nobody else to help you get it. I love that.
I love you. I love you both. I love you both. And even closure in this podcast, that's why I was so excited to come and speak with two beautiful souls in my life, is I still believe that even when you have closure, healing is not final. It's not linear.
Right.
Feelings still come back up, and so every time you tell a story, there's one more step to healing. There's one more step to healing. So when you invited me into your beautiful home, into your podcast, I said, I can't wait to even heal again and again. Healing is fun. We hear the word healing and we think it's work and we think of trauma, but healing can be fun,
It can. And even this, I mean, how fun is this? And we're talking about a really hard topic and we're having a really hard conversation, but I think it's in love and it's in light and it's in the desire to want somebody else to learn from our hardships and our mistake and our grief and our pain. And so for you to share that and again, the nugget of writing that letter and sending it away. And that's how you got your closure. That's huge.
Yeah.
So we love that. So, okay. Tell us how our listeners can find you, get in touch with you, if they want some more Karen Carrington like we do. Tell us.
Awesome. Yes. So to find me, go to my website, www.karencarrington.com. Send me a letter. You could reach out to me. I'm on Instagram at the Karen Carrington Show. And I just absolutely love hearing thoughts and getting in touch with people. That's where you can find me. And
your book, is it available on your website?
Yes, it is. My book is called A Fresh Start. It's called A Fresh Start. And it's available on Amazon. And I talk about all my epic failures in there and how I overcame. And it has 111 positive affirmations in there. And it has a self-help workbook and a free journal in the back to write out your thoughts, just like we talked about today. So
I have a signed copy of this book.
Yes, you do. Yes, you do.
And so listen, we're just so grateful for you today and to have you here and for you to be vulnerable enough to tell that story that I know you haven't told before.
Yeah.
Thank you for being brave with us.
Well, I have fallen in love with you, and I'm sure our listeners have too. So y'all might have to three-way call me next time y'all have.
No, Lori, no. I am flying down to spend time with you. That would mean the world.
Girl, I got over bed, South Carolina, bring it.
We'll just
I
both move in with Tonya for a little weekend or something.
I've been trying to do that for a couple, I know, right? So it's just for me to get down there. I would love
Well, thank you for sharing yourself, your heart, your soul with us today and with our listeners. We truly appreciate it. And you just continue to be the love and light that you are to the world, because you are making a difference. And even if it's just today in my life, in Tanya's life, you have brightened our world. So thank you so much.
Thank you ever so much for having me. Love you.